actually very risky, and they were told it was not very risky. So we have that. And currently now, we have a crisis as standards of living are dropping in certain parts of the world, increasing in other parts of the world, and this constant conflict between a number of groups, and the exploitation, I think, of some of the very major multinationals are leading to very sort of difficult and challenging times for everybody. And one thing just to leave off with, one of the companies I'm working with are complaining about what's happening across North America and other Western jurisdictions with this opioid crisis, which I'm sure is hitting Victoria and other places. A number of people dying and getting addicted to opiate. And this gives you an idea of what's fundamentally wrong with our system. The large pharmaceutical companies, and this is the same as the large tobacco companies a few decades ago, have created a whole slew of drugs that they know are making people addicted to for treating pain. I have one of the doctors I know in Calgary, he said, well, 10% of the people he has coming in for knee surgery, it's basic knee surgery, and they all have to take the opioids, 10% of them get addicted. In back surgery, it's much higher. Now those people not only will take those opioids, get addicted, but they need one or two because it causes other health issues. And then the same drug company will have another set of drugs to get them off their addiction. They're on there for many years. So, and this is the system. And of course, these pharmaceutical companies are the largest lobbyists in government. This is the same thing that happened to tobacco companies a few generations ago. Where's the ethics? Where's the oversight? Where's now everyone is scrambling for solutions as people are dying and it's getting out of control worse than everything. And so this is where, if you had a more just system, and you had stronger governments who could fight against the very large and powerful multinationals who are sometimes stronger than many countries, you would have not had these type of issues. You would not have had the subprime crisis. You would not have had the devastating impact of tobacco industry, alcohol industry, others have done to humanity. And this is where people are looking for guidance, moral guidance, ethical guidance in all sorts of economic activities. With Islamic system in its true form and its true meaning is an alternative, ethical, as well as productive, way to increase human wealth, but do it in a way where, with compassion, with ethics, with morals, and keeping in line with man's responsibility as outlined in the Quran, which is to be the trustee of the resources that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him. So in a nutshell, that's what I would say is my Islamic Finance 101, introduction, to the key concepts of Islamic finance and how they relate, to the crisis that we're having right now. Okay. So with that, I will play Richard.
Jazakallahu khairan, Brother Rehan. Thank you very much. It was certainly very eye-opening and informative. I definitely learned a lot in that short presentation. Moving on, our next speaker is one that I haven't unfortunately had the privilege to get to know, but hopefully, certainly in the near future, wish to change. It is an individual, a person who many people within our own community highly recommended to give this talk, and it's also a person who I'm a bit afraid of mispronouncing their last name, Dr. Daromir Runitsky. He is an associate professor at the Department of Anthropology here at UVic, University of Victoria, and he will share with us a more specific area of Islamic finance today. The topic is debating debt and equity in Islamic finance. Please welcome Dr. Daromir.
Is there a way to show some slides?
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, I just have a few slides that I'd like to show, but while we're getting that set up, I'd just like to thank everyone for coming out today, and I would like to thank Masjid Al-Iman for inviting me here today. It's a real privilege and an honor to be able to come to talk to you a little bit about the work that I've been doing. As Sheikh Ismail mentioned, I'm a professor in anthropology at the University of Victoria, and many people kind of think it's a bit strange when they hear, oh, what is an anthropologist doing studying Islamic finance? You know, why you know, they assume that I'm in business, or they say, why aren't you off in some jungle studying some, you know, isolated tribe or something like this? I said, well, actually, we don't really do that in anthropology anymore, for a whole host of reasons. But one of the things that anthropology, my discipline, has emphasized is the very kind of grounded knowledge of the practices that people in different parts of the world are engaged in, and the attempt to understand those practices, basically what people do in their everyday lives on their own terms. So to try to adopt the viewpoints and the perspectives of the people with whom we're engaged. I thought today what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about how I personally came to be interested in Islamic finance, and then talk a little bit about some of the work that I've done in Malaysia, which is one of the leading countries in Islamic finance today, and then talk about some of the interesting things that I've observed while I was engaged with experts, various types of experts in Islamic finance, to talk about some of the questions they had, some of the debates that they were engaged in, and then what I'd like to conclude on is a sense of what I see as the potential for Islamic finance. And I think the real potential is all of you. I'll get to this in a minute, but I think it's all of you sitting out in the audience here. Because one of the things that I've learned, I started doing this research on Islamic finance back in about 2010. And one of the things I've learned in the last 7 years is that there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of interest, and I think there's a lot of room for imagination, for creativity, and for experimentation in thinking about what Islamic finance, not only what it is, but actually what it will be. And I think what that is going to entail is, you know, not someone else figuring it out, but I think all of us in this room working together, thinking about it, trying to imagine what it might be, how it might address the history and the historical legacy of Islam, but also how it might engage with what we need today in the contemporary world. So I'll just start, I'll talk a little bit about how I got interested in this. I actually started out as an anthropologist, a young anthropologist 20 years ago, very interested in the problem of industrial development and modernization in the developing world. And that interest took me to Indonesia, which, as many of you I'm sure will know, is the country that contains the world's largest Muslim population. And what I was specifically interested in back then was looking at these factories. They were state-owned companies that were struggling. At this time, this was in the early 2000s, Indonesia, as many of you I'm sure will remember, had gone through this period of historical transformation in which they had this authoritarian dictator called General Suharto. He was a general, actually a colonel. He became the president, and he ruled for about 32, 33 years with really an iron fist, very much aligned with the West, with the United States, with Western Europe. And he was very successful at two things. The first thing he was successful at was developing the Indonesian economy. And so Indonesia, between about 1970 and 1998, was one of the fastest growing economies in the world. It was growing like China is today, just massive growth, year over year, 6, 7, 8% a year. So he's very successful at that. The other thing he was very successful at was inhibiting any kind of democratic political development. So it was a very repressive regime. The elections were basically shows, performances in which his party would win every year. And so on the one hand, he was very successful economically, but also very repressive politically. You might remember in 1998, Suharto fell. And he was deposed by the Indonesian people. He had been, for a long time, he had actually been very repressive towards Islam and Islamic political parties. That started to change in the 1990s. But the other